You're listening to the Gabe Molina Podcast.
And we were rolling. So, just so you know, this podcast is not brought to anybody by Black Rifle Coffee. It just tastes really good. And it's got to have cream in it. But I'm here with Juliene Brazinski Simpson. And I know you as Mema, which is right, Mema?
That's correct, Mema.
So that's the when I first saw you in the neighborhood, because your daughter and your daughter-in-law live up the street. I said, Mema, right? And then eventually we were having conversations online, and Nina had said, you need to talk to Shannon's mom. And I said, okay, what does she got going on? And she said, she was an Olympian. And I said, what? She's like, she's an Olympian. And I said, no, she's not. And she said, yeah, look her up. And so I started looking you up, and I told Shannon the other day, I said, basically, you're a national treasure, is what you are. So I'm super excited to have you here. And you brought your silver medal from the 1976 games in Montreal, right?
That's correct.
And I did some more background checking. You also won a gold in Mexico. Was it Mexico City?
Yes, Pan American Games.
Pan American. And another silver in Moscow.
Yes, World University Games.
That's so
73.
awesome. You know, I started going through your credentials that I saw online, and they just were never ending. So let me ask you this. Like, I guess what I want to start with is, and you probably get asked this question quite a bit, but at what age did you find that you were a competitor? Because you don't get to where you were without being a competitor. And it starts with having that competitive drive in you, and then it's nurtured, right? So at what age were you and what were you doing when you said, hey, I'm a competitor and I'm going to start focusing on multiple sports or one sport, or what was it that kind of drove you in that?
Well, I think my background certainly speaks for that. We had a family. Mom and dad both worked in a factory, hard workers. My dad worked for Singer Company. My mom worked for Thomas and Betts, which makes your electrical outlets.
Okay.
And I'm the youngest of three. My sister's 5 years older, and my brother's 2 years older. My sister decided to be a nun, which she still is. Mm-hmm. She's been Mother Superior many, many times. And my brother and I, being so close in age, we hung out a lot together. And I just really enjoyed being around the guys.
Oh, really?
I learned how to spit like the guys, how to throw like the guys, how to do a whole lot of things that probably girls at that stage and at that age. And during that time, it was unacceptable. You know, I remember getting a pair of Keds sneakers, and because of the way I played basketball on the outdoor courts, they were ripped up by the end of the day.
Oh, wow.
So my mother couldn't really buy me any girls' sneakers because they wouldn't last. And I really think if you're talking about being competitive, I watched the boys and I wanted to always be like them. And I liked to be so physical and just the confidence that the boys carried. I want to be like that. I want to be as good as my brother. And there were so many times when I would have to go and watch his games on Saturday mornings when he played in these different leagues and so on.
Was he a basketball player as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, when he was in junior high and high school and, the CYO and so on, and I always felt it was so unfair that I had to go watch my brother and I couldn't play. There was no girls' teams. But when I got to the 7th grade, they started a CYO girls team. And back in the day, that's when you played six on six, 2 guards, 2 rovers, and 2 forwards.
Wow.
Yeah, so I did play that for a couple years. And but we played a grand total of like 8 games. And while the guys were playing their 20-some games. And then I got into high school and had an opportunity to play on the basketball team. my sister being a nun, I had a dream of following her as well. So I went out from New Jersey to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for 2 years, and I was studying to be a nun. And so I was at that boarding school, but I went to their high school and I was able to play basketball. But after the second year, I said to my mother and father, I really need to change the schools and come back home because I can't play and pray at the same time because my knees were killing me.
Yeah.
So, of course, my mother knew I didn't want to be a nun anymore. So went back home and attended a Catholic high school in New Jersey. And at that time, so we're talking about the late 60s, Catholic schools were the only ones that provided girls basketball for girls. All the public schools had intramurals, but they did not compete, obviously, against other schools for probably until 1972. I think they were forced to do that.
Were you finding competitive play in the CYO leagues? Or?
The teams that I had been on had always been one of the best.
Okay.
So in high school in New Jersey, we came in second in the Catholic school league, losing to a couple points or here or there. So we were very, very competitive. And then when I was looking at colleges, all the colleges in New Jersey had a grand total of 12 games. But in the Midwest, they had games of 40 or 50 season.
Wow.
Yeah, unbelievable. So some recruiter came to my coach's school, which was a public school, Roselle Park, where I lived. She was the PE teacher. And they came through, and they were talking about John F. Kennedy College in Wahoo, Nebraska. And so at our Catholic school, she was our coach. And she brought the information. She said, I don't know if you're interested or not. Well, I filled out the information, and immediately they contacted me, said, we want you to come play for our school. So, I went sight unseen, went to Nebraska, Wahoo, Nebraska.
We talked a little bit earlier about me not being within a 2-hour radius of my home. So what was your feeling about leaving home and going that far away? Because, to a young person, that's pretty far. Halfway across the country. Did you not think about it, or were you just really focused on playing the game?
I think I was just really focused. In New Jersey, in order to get into some of the schools that I wanted to do physical education, you had to take a written test. You had to take, that's besides SATs and so on, but you had to take a written test. You had to go take a physical test. They only had 12 games. And I'm like, and they really convinced me, come on out, you could really contribute. And, so, I don't know. I think I love adventure. I love change. And I'm sure I missed him. I don't remember missing him at this stage of my life. But I do remember I had a great 4 years, and we won a national title when I was there, and I was a 4-time All-American.
Wow.
And, and so it is interesting that I was able to play with the boys. And my brother was a very, very big influence on me. He would push me beyond my means many times. And one of the stories when I go out and speak to young people or any group that I speak to, especially a few years ago, I spoke to a retired group. I think the youngest guy was like 85 years old, and they love sports. And tell us stories. And I was telling about the one about never giving up, and really using your head at the same time. And I was the only girl playing. I was the point guard, on my brother's team, and we were playing some kids from another school we knew, and, they were juniors and seniors in high school. And so I'm coming down, and I go to pass the ball, and the kid intercepts it and defensively goes down the other end and scores. And my brother said to me, what are you doing? You pass the ball, and you make a mistake, you run back. All right. And so I'm like, all right, and he's yelling at me because he said I just gave up. So next time I'm coming down, I'm really going to, So I go to pass it, and of course they intercept it again. So I run all the way back, and I get in front of him, and the guy hits me and makes the basket. I jump up and I yell, charge. And the guy says, I didn't charge you. I said, yes, you did. And so then he said a few other things, and he tosses the ball at me, turns away, because the guys were saying, let her go, you charged, As he turns to walk away, because of how he threw the ball at me, I took the ball, and as he wasn't looking at me, I hit him right in the back of the head.
You made him turn around and look at you.
He turned and came toward me. My brother stepped in between. And then the guy went down the other end. And after every single time he had told me, you can't be afraid, right? Mm-hmm. He goes to pass me the ball and he says to me, that time you needed to be afraid. So on the way home...
Because I was afraid.
Well, on the way home, that's what he talked about is, like you can't be afraid of things. You got to do the best you can. And you just don't take cheap shots like that. He said, I'll never step in the middle of you again. Whether he would have or not, I don't know. I never did it again.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily a cheap shot. It is to some degree, but at the same time, when you're in the heat of the game and there's that much intensity, things happen.
I tell you, I really learned a lot in the playgrounds, and I feel bad for the young people that everything they do is so organized, and they can't just go play. And we used to have to, kind of do our own problems. Okay, I couldn't get and play on the court unless I made a free throw to be on that team. Yeah. And sometimes if there was enough guys and I was a girl, I had to go wait when they ran up and down the court. I could shoot a little bit down the opposite end that they weren't at. Yeah. And so, like, you learn to earn your spot. Sure. And in that situation, I learned that, you can't get mad. You've got to do what you can't give up. And, you just can't throw the ball at somebody like that because then you pay the price. So I think all those things, we're not getting to our young people because they're being coached, and they're not really being coached by the skill of the game. And there's so many AAU programs now, and they just want to win. Yeah. And so we're going to run a play, and we're going to give it to the star player. But okay, if you two are arguing, stop. So the parent or the coach is taking care of everything. So I was really pretty fortunate that I was able to do that. And I think while I was in college, I did get asked to try out for some teams. I played and represented the United States on 11 international teams. Wow. And my college team got to go to the People's Republic of China. We were the very first
what year was that?
Team, 1973. Wow. They took an all-star men's team with Quinn Buckner and that group of generation. And then because we won the national title, they just took our whole team. So, that really was an experience. Though in the last Olympics, watching people walk on the Great Wall of China, I was like, I was there. I got pictures up there. But you don't appreciate it while you're going through it sometimes. You do, you're having fun, but you don't realize the impact. It
almost takes you a little while to kind of digest it, and sometimes that little while might be several years that you can kind of look back and go, man, I did all this stuff. You were so busy performing and competing and earning, and whether it was the accolades that you have, or even just a position on a certain team, that I guess that's where your focus is in the middle of the action. So being able to look back on those events and those things happening to you, it's gotta be like reliving it all over again, if not potentially even better, because you can kind of see those places and things that people are competing in these days, and knowing that you've been there. I love it. That's amazing.
Well, I sometimes my husband will remember a whole lot more than I do in certain things. And I say to him, I feel like sometimes I just wasn't where you were, or I don't remember that. Yeah. And he will say many times, because I'm 69 now, and maybe it's all Alzheimer's. And he'll say, no, you were so focused on what you were doing and what you needed to get done. All the other things around, he said, that you don't look at it that well.
You almost missed it, yeah.
Yeah, you got to enjoy it. You got to enjoy the teams, So, playing on the 73 World University Games, and then 75 Pan American Games, and then we had to qualify for the Olympics. And, on that team, myself and Pat Summit were selected co-captains. And, that kind of put everything together for all the years, that you put in for, and all the hard work and everything. You're looking, you go, wow. And our Olympic coach, she'll always say, just remember, you were the very first. There'll be many after you.
Yeah.
But you were the very first. And so...
How does that feel? I mean, how does that feel? One question that I have for you, and we can get to it in a little bit, but how does that feel to know that you're the very first, to accomplish that or to compete there? Do you understand how massive that is at the time, or is that something that you realized later on?
Well, I think while it was happening, we knew it was special because they talked about women's basketball before 1976. And you have to remember, 1936 is when you had men's basketball being added, and how many years it took for them to even have a discussion on it. So it was something we really didn't even know till 2 years before the Olympics that they were actually going to do it.
Wow.
And then they only had 6 women's teams that they were going to say qualified because they didn't know if people would be interested. You know how that goes. And so we knew it was special because we were the first. And then every team after that, it's almost, they were a little compared, but we wanted them to be better.
Yeah.
And better and better. And obviously, we have taken the gold medal. And there's been a few Olympics now recently that people are just, they can't catch up to us now. But to be the first, and they used to call us pioneers, but now they've got a nice name calling us trailblazers. So,
what do you like to be called? Just a competitor, huh?
Yeah.
I get the vibe from you that when you were younger, you probably played with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. When you talk about the stories about being younger and competing against the guys, it really does bring back memories of my sister growing up in a house full of boys, and with her dad. And I was a lot younger than what they were at the time, but I remember my 2 older brothers forcing her to do what they did. If they were lifting weights, she was lifting weights. If they were out playing games, they brought her with her. They competed a lot in softball, and they were baseball players. When she was younger, there was no girls' league, so she played with the boys. Even at one point, I think she played softball with the boys as well, because there was nothing there for her, especially in a small town like where we grew up in. So she was constantly competing with the boys and being treated like one and being forced to do things, that she probably, I'm sure at one point she wanted to be a nice young lady, but she was out there getting dirty and doing what the boys were doing. I think at one point she was leg pressing 660 pounds. She was really strong. I know eventually, I think they brought volleyball to town, I think her senior year, so she got to play volleyball. But just not having those things available to you guys, to her, things like that. I mean, I feel like if I was in that position, which I wasn't, I feel like I'd have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, right? Wanting to not only compete against the people that you're competing against, but to show everybody that, hey, I should have been here a long time ago. Other people should have been here a long time ago. So I can see that in you. I can see that in her. I can see that in you when you talk about it. And it's just impressive to see the things that you guys have accomplished. And, you say trailblazer. Was it the pioneer also? It's got to start somewhere, and I think it's such a blessing that you were at the forefront of that, and there's so many people that play now, you don't even think about it, there's other places that need to be opened up to women's sports, but there's so much more of it now that we just kind of take it for granted, and we don't think about the things that you guys had to go through,
Well, and you have to think, before my time, there were many women before my time that probably was as good as I was, but you wouldn't know about them.
Yeah.
They did play in 1950s. They played in the World University Games. The United States was represented, Pan American Games, but you don't hear about it. You don't hear about anything right now except the NCAA, which started in 1982 for women, and the WNBA.
Yeah.
You don't hear about AAU or AIAW of years ago, of the championships of the 70s and 80s, a little bit in the 90s. So so until the marketing and so on comes, it is really difficult. And I think I admire your sister being pushed, because I think years ago that's what you did as a family. The guys couldn't go unless the sister could go.
Sure.
Like my brother really couldn't leave and go do stuff with his friends unless I went with him. Like you just hung around all the time. And, even when I would go, I remember being in, I think it was the 5th or 6th grade, and we went to go to the baseball field. And years ago, there was somebody that constantly took care of the fields, and one end was football, one was, the big recreation area. And if I didn't have my hair in pigtails and put my pigtails up in a baseball cap, that guy would come on his little cart and he would kick me off, because girls were not allowed to play. Wow. So I always had a hat on. We played football. I'd have to put something, like one of those stocking caps on or whatever, just so they didn't know. And a couple of times I didn't, I'd get booted off. My dad coached my brother's Little League baseball team. And, one practice, a lot of kids didn't show up. And so he picked 2 kids and he said, we're just going to play today. And the first person picked me. And he said, you can't pick her. My brother was a captain of the other team. He goes, then I want her. He said, no, you can't have her. So, it's great of our experience being able to do that. But it is good. As we talk on our podcast today, the WNBA had their draft for 2022. It started at 6 to 8 o'clock. And it was, as you watched it, it was identical and in so many ways to the men's NBA draft. Yeah. And those are the kind of things that we need to continue to do for women. I believe the women's Final Four game had 4.8 million people watching. Wow. That was the most for men's or women's since 2008. Yeah. So, it's there. So your sister and myself and others, we got it there.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember my dad hitting the ball to my sister really hard. And he would tell her, nobody's going to hit the ball to you as hard as I'm going to hit the ball to you. And he was getting her ready. She was getting her ready. And, and my brother's taking her with him. Part of the conversation I remember them having when we were younger was the fact that we live together. You know what I'm thinking. So even though you may not be as strong or as fast as maybe somebody else on the team, we know what we're thinking. And so we can communicate that way. And it helped them while they were competing. And that was something that I always keep in mind when I think about her, participating with my older brothers and playing in sports with them and stuff. But let me ask you this. How does it make you feel, and it's got to feel great, but how does it make you feel to see where it's come from when you played to watching the draft like this and seeing these young ladies make a living off of playing this sport now?
Well, it's to me leap years. It should have happened many years ago, but this is what I would have lived for as well. Yeah. If I had an opportunity to be able to be drafted, I would have loved it. I probably would have continued to play like Sue Bird's playing. She's 40-some years old. I'd been playing too. But then I look at it, I've had a great life. My husband's been great. My 2 kids, I probably wouldn't have had opportunities to have my name Mema by our 3 granddaughters. So, it always works as it's supposed to. I think I'm sometimes a little critical of how things are put forward. I always think there might be one more better way, but I was very, very impressed with what the WNBA is starting to do now, and that's because they're getting, money talks, and you have to promote. And I think as I go back and talk about the women's Final Four, there was so much advertising because it was March Madness for women's basketball. It wasn't just the women's Final Four; it was March Madness, and. I always said when I was coaching many years ago is that when I started to see change is when men were now having young girls and they were looking at how could my daughter get the same exposure and opportunities as my son.
Yeah.
And so some of our pro players for the men's, they started to at least push and say, hey, how come we can't do this? Let's do this. But that's what I find is when the men started to see that they wanted their daughters to have the opportunity to play even at the same college that they played at.
Yeah.
And we began to see the changes in that. And one of the things about the Olympics I have to bring up, because I always like to say that when I'm speaking to groups about what your role is. And on the Olympic team, I was a point guard. And my job was to be that coach on the court.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we wanted to do is to score the very first bucket in ever women's basketball game, because we knew that would be history forever. And so we played in the very first game, 9 o'clock in the morning. So for 2 weeks prior to that, we were up like at 4:30, go practice from 5 to whatever it was, And so in that first game, off the tip, Japan got the ball. And I was guarding the point guard. And everybody knows that we scored the first bucket, right? But what they didn't know prior to that is that Japan got the ball first. And the girl, point guard, started to take me one way and then was driving to the basket. And all I can see is she's not getting even to the free throw line. And I fouled her. So I have the very first foul in the Olympics.
That's awesome.
And then they threw the ball away, and then we came down. I passed the ball to Lucy Harris, and she scored the very first basket in the Olympics. So I would say to people, you see my name on the team, but you'll see Lucy's picture because she scored the first bucket. That was her job.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't know who gave her the ball. It was me.
Yeah.
So my job was to pass her the ball. Now, my picture will never be in there, but I do know. There's just something about you learning what your role is on each team. And, I just think it's amazing that they just have the new documentary out on Lucy Harris. It's called The Queen of Basketball.
Oh, really?
And actually, she won an award a couple weekends ago because of that.
That's wonderful.
Documentary that they put out. She's passed recently, but she had an opportunity at least to see the film and of course a little bit on our Olympic team and so on.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: who was some of the? I guess y'all lost to Japan at first.
Correct.
But who were some of the toughest teams that you guys had faced? Whether it was the Olympics or the Pan American Games, or who were some of the toughest? Because we have a hard time trying to grasp the totality of talent around our area. You're competing against women from all over the world. So who are some of the tougher teams that you guys ran into? Whether it was discipline or just skill, who are some of the tougher teams that you guys ran into?
Well, at that time in the mid '70s, the Russian team, the Soviet team, was top. In fact, they had a 7'2" girl.
Oh wow!
Her name was Juliana Semenova, and she was legit 7'2".
Wow! So
it was very difficult to compete against her. But they were very mechanical. They practiced. That was their job, is to play on the team. And so they would practice 4 or 6 hours a day, 365 days. They were taken from their homes, whatever, and this is your job, and this is what you do. I would have to say Czechoslovakia. I think, again, just like the Japan and Czechoslovakia, they didn't have as much height, but they were very mechanical. And I think that's one thing that we in the United States, we have that spirit, we have that little extra kick that other countries, if you watch, they don't have that same click and that determination. Like we could be down by 10 points and then be up by 5. And them, they just continue to just be very mechanical.
Do you think that loose play is kind of an X factor, I guess?
I do. And I think other teams nowadays, other young people are coming from different countries to play in our country at colleges. So then they're bringing it back to their countries.
Oh, I see.
So we're starting to find that in other countries now.
You know, one thing that's interesting is like, and I'm not even going to attempt to act like I know more basketball than you, because I can guarantee you I don't. But we had a foreign exchange student from Argentina, and then of course, you know, you had Manu from Argentina that played with the Spurs, and it seemed like there was a lot of beyond looseness with those types of guys, that it was almost erratic play, but it kept things really quick and fast paced. So do you know where that kind of style has come from, I guess, of being less mechanical and more kind of free flowing?
Well, international play is different. The officials don't handle the ball as much as in the United States.
Oh.
So if there's a turnover, you just take it out of bounds, the other team, and you go with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you get an extra step. The lanes, the three-point lanes, line is wider. So there's a lot difference that keeps that game flowing.
Oh, I
and
see.
it is a quick game. Don't get me wrong when I say they're mechanical. It's just that they are taught to do the same thing over and over and over again. For us, what we're taught is if the person's playing your right, you go left.
Yeah.
If you're playing over right, they're still going to go to the right. So, you know, in speaking to the people and saying how much Lucy Harris scored that first bucket, I always say to them, one thing you could find in the record books is that I am one only person, I believe, still that shot 100% from the free throw line.
You did. You were 16 for 16, correct?
Yep.
And that was a record, wasn't it?
Yep.
Do you still own that?
I think somebody might have had 15 for 16, maybe. I think that was Diane Taurasi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I haven't looked at it recently, but yeah, if someone has, they haven't made 16 out of 16.
What was your process?
For making the free throw.
Yeah, for being so consistent at the free throw. You know, you always hear about people talking about having so much trouble at the line, you know, or being consistent at the line. And to be that consistent on that kind of stage.
All mental. All mental. And your reflex, you do the same thing over and over, but it is mental. And it took me experience of not making free throws in college. I had an opportunity to win at women's WNIT game. Mm-hmm. We were ahead. They fouled me, and I missed at 2 different times. I missed 4 free throws total, and we lost the game by 2 points. And after that, that was my freshman year. I vowed that would never happen again. So I would shoot 100 free throws at a time. And I would say, and I don't know if you remember Rick Barry. Rick Barry played for the ABA.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yep. He lived about 3 houses from me.
Oh,
now,
really?
He was a little bit older than me, so I didn't know him as much. My brother and sister knew him. I really didn't. But our families knew each other. And he was a great free throw shooter, but he shot underhanded. And I didn't shoot underhanded, but that's who I related to on free throws because he was the best in the ABA and the NBA. So I would say Rick Barry shot 96. I got to shoot 97. So as soon as I missed that one that I couldn't get to 97, I'd start all over again.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours. And really, as a point guard, that's pretty much your assist, your free throws, couple layups. You don't get a whole lot.
Yeah.
You don't get a whole lot of other options. You know, game has changed though. A lot of point guards now have different roles than I did, but you know, I was determined that we weren't going to lose a game because of me missing a free throw.
So you're the on-court coach. So how did you lead those ladies? Were you stern, or how were you with them?
Well, being from New Jersey, I have a little bit of little humor. We had a gal, Charlotte Lewis. We called her Peaches. She's African American, about 6'3", I guess, but she used to wear her afro so big at that time, right? And she was the only one that could really jump and put her hand on the rim. And so before the game, I would try to motivate her and say, all right, touch it 5 times before we, go in. So after we do our warm-up, she and I would be there. She'd touch it 5 times. And Pat and I would do a different drill of passing and doing some things, like certain things before the game. So I really try to just bring everybody together. Billy Moore, who was our head coach, she really depended on me to make sure that whatever she wanted it to happen, it was my job. Even if it wasn't my job, it was my job to make sure. And I think I got along with all of them off the court. And I just really feel like if you get to know that person off the court, you could work with them and find things that make them work on the court. We'd have to do suicides, and there was a time where Lucy Harris, she was very lazy, and she missed it, and so she had to run by herself, and everybody else was sitting there, and I hopped up and said, and Pat and I both hopped up and said, come on, we'll run with you. So we ran extra suicides just, so she had somebody to run with. And I think, as a leader, you're part of it. You just don't, you just don't say, okay, do this, this. They got to see that you could do it.
I guess you build that rapport early and often. That way, when you need them in critical times, it's already built. They can depend on you, and you can depend on them. When the game's on the line, or you're running out of time, or things are tight.
And I also think that what happens is that I was able to communicate to the coach when there were some things that I felt like she needed to know, and sometimes being really hard on somebody when they were having a bad day versus like, okay, all right, so this is happening, but still yell at her. Not that you don't discipline them, but just have an idea of why that's happening. And in one international trip I think we were touring, and we were in Tokyo, and the gal that backed me up, this was just one of the international teams I played, was really like down, and she kept backing me up, and she felt like she should start and whatever. So I'd gone in and I talked to the coach and just said, you know what, like, we're playing 6 or 7 more games. I don't care if I don't start. Maybe it will help us. And she's like, all right. We talked about it a little bit. I didn't care what she did. But she did start the other gal, and it was horrible. The poor gal had such a hard time because her role was coming off the bench.
Yeah.
That's why they had her on the team. Not that she was the type that could start and get the group going. So, I enjoyed that. I never took advantage of it. I just always wanted the person to do better than what they did. And I think what I found a lot is I had to be their biggest cheerleader, because that's something I think back in the day, we had male coaches, most of us. And, male coaches they're more stern and, little sarcastic comments. And I love my college coach, but he would always say to me, I would be on offense and I'd make a mistake or something. He'd say, come over here, look at this group. And I'd look down there, and, I'd be the point guard. And he goes, you got to be smarter than the dummy in front of you. And I would get so upset with him, but I understood.
Yeah.
That's who he was, and that was the generation, of things. And so I think my personality, because of my brother and everything, how I was brought up, even with my family, okay, if you made a mistake, we're yelling at you, get over it, and move on.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I was real young and I would cry or something, my mother would say, come on, stop crying, get out of the jig, crying jig. She'd say, you already did it. I yelled at you. Now get back outside and play, So
she was your first coach then.
Oh my gosh, yeah. She always told me you could be as good as the boys. She always told me that. You want to do it, you could be. She was one of 11 children.
Oh wow.
And she always fought with her brothers, like to do the things. And she didn't really play a lot of athletics because obviously they didn't have it for her. But
were your parents from here, or were they from Poland originally?
No, my parents were born and raised
Okay.
in the United States. But my grandparents, one from Poland, the other from Lithuania.
Okay.
So so there's a generation of immigrants that
That's
have come
awesome.
over, and But I just think that, and my dad, same thing. He'd always say, "Put your mind to it. You could do anything you want." And he'd just tell Shannon and Jennifer, my two girls, that all the time. Put your mind to it. You can do it. But my mother, she would say, "You could do what the boys do. Yeah, you're just as good as they are." But then she'd yell at me because I'd be dribbling the basketball in the house. And she told a story one time. I don't remember where we were, but I had forgotten. She said, I would tell her to put that basketball down and put her head in the books because there was nothing for girls for basketball because there wasn't at the time. And I said, you used to tell me to find a boss, be a secretary, and find a boss that paid well, right? And she used to say that. And when it all came together and she saw me starting to travel and make these teams and so on, and I was really glad that it was in Montreal because my parents were able to come and watch me compete. So that was an experience. And years ago, they allowed you to bring people into the Olympic Village. And so my mom and dad, we had to clear them like a week before or so. And they were able to experience the Olympic Village.
What was that like for you to watch them come see you be a part of that? Especially knowing that your mom wanted you in the books rather than the basketball because, like you said, at the time there was no future for it. Mm-hmm. So what was that like for you to see them participate in the things that you were participating in?
I have been really blessed because when I look back and think what they did to help me progress up to that point and what they sacrificed when they were there, and we were on the 7th floor, and I can see down where they would wait for me outside the Olympic Village, and they'd sit for hours if they needed to, depending on my schedule. And I have pictures of them out there, and I think of how much they have sacrificed, and they were so proud to be part of everything. Even when I began coaching, they come to all the games, and my dad, I don't know how he never got kicked out of any of the basketball games. When we were at Bucknell, he would constantly yell to this one official, "Don't lose your day job." All the typical stuff. And sometimes he'd run and he'd be, he wasn't mean or anything, but he'd be just telling them they just can't see what they need to see. Yeah, so it's been really, I've been blessed. I look back, and as you started to talk about the experience, until you do sit down and you go, wow, this is real. I always dream about writing a book. A lot of people have encouraged me to do that. I just retired over a year ago, and my whole retirement has been for my kids and the grandkids. I really haven't looked beyond that. I'm sure I will at some point. Yeah. But I have thoroughly enjoyed being retired. I just keep telling my kids, just because the word retirement is not I'm old, I can still do some of the same things that I was able to do when I worked a year and a half ago. But I've really have enjoyed just value of my time with them. Yeah. I look back and there have been times when I was coaching that I missed different things of both Shannon and Jennifer's different things that they have had, and So I don't want to miss anything anymore. I just want to sit and enjoy it, and enjoy people like yourself and others that are in the community and on this cul-de-sac.
It's a great cul-de-sac. You know, I really hope that you do write a book, because I think that somebody like you, who has the story that you have, to be able to write a book about it and tell your story. In telling your story, you're telling the story of other women who took the ride with you. You know, you're telling the story of your parents who took the ride with you. And it turns into an autobiography, but also a biography of others that were on the ride with you, the journey with you. And so it's a benefit to so many people, you know. It's a benefit to so many girls that are getting drafted in the draft now, you know, to be able to go, oh, this is where it came from. You know, when you're 18, 19, 20, 22 getting drafted, you know, you look back and you think of the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. You don't go back that far, you know, but when you can actually go back and go, these women created what they had, right? Now, not to take away from the women participating nowadays, but you were creating a future for yourself in the midst of participating in those games. You know, it wasn't already laid out for you. It wasn't there yet, you know, and I think that's a story that should be told, you know. And there's so many people that you've benefited from playing with or practicing under or coaching with, that I think in telling your story in a book, it would encompass all that, and it would benefit so many people to have that story told. So I hope you do write it.
Yeah, well, you know, I look back and I think what I do now is every day I try to think in my mind and say a little prayer for all the people that have helped me.
Yeah.
You know, different coaches, different teammates. And since the passing of Lucy Harris about a month ago, our Olympic, there's 9 of us left now. And it just seems like we're kind of writing a little bit more to each other. I send them all a Texas postcard and an Easter card. And, you know, people are like looking at it probably going, what the heck? But I think sometimes, whether you see them or you hear from them in a long time, when we ever get back together again, and we do once in a while, we don't miss a beat.
No,
you know,
you
it's
can't.
Just there's just that special bond that you have with, it's like your cul-de-sac people.
Yeah.
You know, no matter where they go, what they do, there's always that special connection.
Yeah.
You know, that you have with them. But this has been great. I've appreciated it.
No, one thing that I do want to get into some of your coaching as well, because you coached at Arizona State, right?
I did.
And you had quite a good turnout, didn't you?
I did.
Was it 300 wins?
Well, I don't know. I'm 69, as I said.
You know, it's got to be nice when you win so much. You
can't remember.
You don't keep track.
Oh, my gosh. I was pretty young when I took that job, only a few years older than my oldest player on the team. But it was a great opportunity for me, and I was able to build a program there. Went to the Sweet 16 a couple times. We were contenders and had All-Americans on the team. In fact, one of my players, Kim Hampton, who played for me at Arizona State, still holds many of the records. She had way over 2,000 points, 2,000 rebounds. Yeah, and she just had her number retired a couple of years ago. She played for the New York Liberty. She'd worked for many years, and after playing, and just a lot of opportunities at a young age that I had, and loved Arizona. Both our girls were born in Arizona.
Okay. So, I mean, nothing beats competing physically, but how have you liked coaching compared to playing? Is it comparable, or is it not even close?
It's completely different. I would rather, it took me a little bit to adjust. And they always say that after you're done playing. I think as a younger coach, I was out there trying to show them everything. When you get a little bit older, you get to see a little bit more, and you're able to look at it from a different standpoint. And, the more you coach, the better you get,
Sure.
When you work on it. But, there's nothing like competing as an athlete. Sometimes I dream about competing, and I wake up and it's like the happiest day. A couple times I even dreamt about dunking the ball, and I do. I really, when I go to bed, I'm really thinking positive thoughts. So that's why I have such really good dreams.
That's good.
As a coach, it was more about teaching them during practice, and then like a chess match during the game. So I would make a move and change and do something, then the other coach would do it. And it's like at the end of the game, I call a timeout, and then they'd call a timeout. We'd see what each other's doing, and it was a different satisfaction that you got. I loved the physical part of it as a player, but I think the strategic part and preparing the players as a coach was really something I enjoyed doing. Plus, I enjoy watching them run because I didn't have to run anymore. Let's do another 5 suicides.
Well, let me ask you this. We'll close with this. You got 2 lightning fast grandbabies here in the cul-de-sac. And how many grandchildren do you have total?
3.
3?
Yep.
All girls?
All girls.
So let me ask you this. 20 years from now, 15 years from now, they're going to say, I'm going to listen to that podcast. What do you want to tell them tonight that'll help them continue for the rest of their life? Whether it's in a career or in athletics or just in life in general. Things that you've learned through your experiences, because you've experienced things that the majority of people will never experience. So through your experiences, what would you like to leave those girls a little nugget of information that you can give them that gives them a little head start when they get a little older?
Wow. Okay. I don't know if we have enough time for everything.
I'll put a brand new battery in here.
I would have to say that I would want them to be who they truly are, their uniqueness. And each one of them have so many special qualities right now. And I think I would like for them to know they need to find what they love and have the passion to continue to work and reach their goals. I have a big thing that I say a lot when people used to ask me about my experience in the Olympics, and it's you have to dream, plan, work, and believe. And that's what I would tell the girls too. You got to dream, you dream big. And every time you have a thought, that constitutes a dream. And then you got to plan, how can I make that dream come true? Some things you just dream and you don't plan. They're just dreams. But how can I get what I would like, what my dream is? How can I accomplish that? And then the third thing is you got to work. So if you got this dream, you got this plan, in order for it to happen, you have to work at it. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs and arounds, and what is it you can do to work to accomplish your goals? And the last thing is you have to believe. I always say I'm not a preacher, but I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. And I would hope that they would have a lot of faith in the man above and a lot of faith in themselves. And, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I have learned throughout my years. And if I think about my past, that's really what helped me get to where I am. And that's what I would hope that the girls would listen to this someday, all 3 of you, whoever knows there's anymore, is that you find what you love and you do it. You find somebody you love and you do it with them. And that you enjoy what you do. And so as you look back, there are going to be a lot of things you look back and go, oh, that didn't work, this worked, that worked. But then you get to be my age, and you're like, wow, what opportunities I've had, and how many people's lives I've touched, and how many lives has touched mine to make me who I am today.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mema.
All right.
You're the best Mema on the cul-de-sac. And thank you for sharing your story with me. Thank you for bringing the medal, and I really do appreciate you sitting with me and sharing your story.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Gabe Molina Podcast.